People sentenced in the 80s 2000s. What modern world change shocked you the most? I knew a guy who was in prison from about 1999 or 2000 for about 12 to 13 years. When he got out he did a few odd jobs for my family. My mum was friends with his parents and was helping him earn money for stuff like mowing the lawn and cleaning, etc. While he was over we found that he had no idea how to use Google, how to find a phone number in his phone contacts, and barely knew how to send a text message. We helped him out with a few of those skills, but lost touch a while later. I'm not sure where he is these days. I remember helping a guy who went in 2005, got released 2014, had a black and green AudioVox phone in his effects, and asked where he could activate it. I had to explain that it wouldn't be happening. Like 3 months later, I like the iPhone, but I'm gonna wait for the release of the newest one. Adapted pretty quick. No matter what year you go in, when you come out and stand on carpet for the first time is the most disturbing feeling. There was that documentary of someone who was sentenced in the 70s, Otis I think, and he just couldn't believe the stuff he was seeing. Since he lived in New York, with all the screens it was just a different city than all the different colored drinks and people wearing earphones, like they were in the Secret Service. It's an interesting thing to watch. I hired a guy that was released after 17 years, circa 2005. A week after he started working he bought a phone. He had a childlike wonder with push to talk and texting. A week later he was pissed off that he couldn't text his order into Hungry Hours. I remember getting the bus years ago, and this old bloke got on heading away from town center towards the more residential areas. Without a second thought he sparked up a cigar. One of the passengers told him you can't smoke on a bus. He apologized and quickly stubbed it out, but said he got discharged from prison that day, and when he went in you could smoke anywhere you wanted, so this was a massive culture shock to him. A co-worker a few years ago had spent 10 years in jail. He got out right when Bluetooth headsets for phones were huge. He'd talk about all the random conversations he thought people were trying to have with him, and smartphones freaked him the hell out. Knew a guy who was blown away by digital cameras. He had purchased an old terrible one, and couldn't get over how amazing it was. Got a call from a woman filing a claim on some abandoned funds. I got all her information, and then asked for an email address. And she said, "What's email? I keep hearing about it, but you gotta understand I've been in prison a long time." My cousin's husband, that she married while he was serving 10 years beginning around 2008, wanted the first thing he did as a free man was to go to Hollywood Video and rent movies to watch with her. Then she blew his mind with Netflix. At least the idea of Netflix and chill wasn't far from his original plan, but he was shocked about there not being video stores anymore. Not me, but my father. I remember him trying to flip a CD upside down and put it back into the CD player, like you would do with a record, because it was skipping. Didn't notice how much of a big deal that must have been to him at the time. Adjusting to life on the outside can be really tough. My friend's older brother was jailed in 1994 and served 15 years. He said when he went in, anyone with an in-car phone was super rich, and to then see absolutely everyone have a completely cordless pocket-sized phone was amazing. He also said that all the TV adverts had websites to visit or were for completely online stores, which were a bit of an alien concept, as he'd never really seen or used the internet. He also found the chip and pin process of paying for things on a bank card extremely exciting. Not me personally, but we had an older guy rent out a room in our house a few years back. Usually we rented it out to students, but someone let us know that he had just moved to our city and needed something temporary until he found permanent accommodation. It was a bit frustrating because this guy would not use the internet to search for a car or place to live. Didn't know how it worked and didn't trust it. We tried to help him learn how because we thought he was just old and stubbornly resisted technology, but nope. Turns out that he had spent 11.5 years in maximum security prison after being framed by WA police for murder in the mid-90s. Came out with trust issues and a dislike for the new internet. I was talking to a lady who runs the education for a federal prison in Florida. She said when they start getting rambunctious or off topic, she mentions a new feature of the newest iPhone and all of a sudden they are very interested in what she has to say again. My friend got out of jail recently and was blown away by how many LEDs are everywhere and how many stores are using insane amounts of LED billboards. We were all at a buddy's house and he was blinded by all the bright LED light in the house. I asked a friend what the hardest thing was for him readjusting to being free again. This is a roundabout of what he said. Closing doors. I'd leave the fridge open every time without fail for months. You're not allowed to open or shut anything for yourself. And I'd accidentally let the pets outside. By forgetting I needed to close the front door someone else had opened in front of me. You forget the last one in rule etc. and have to learn it all again. What was the thing you found you liked the most? Candy Crush. Gets phone back out and starts playing. 5 minutes later exclaim they've leveled up excitedly. So sweet. A friend said his dad's friend tried VR after about 30 years in prison for like second-degree murder or something, and he got scared, fell over and broke the headset. Not my personal experience, but a man I worked with, after he was released from prison, after being sentenced as a young adult was blown away by the touchscreen ordering at Wawa, and could not fathom why the employees could not take an oral order from him. I'll never forget this. I tell this story often. I remember being in 8th grade when the U-Scan machines first Kroger. I remember them being the first to have it in Louisville, Kentucky. Anyway, I had grabbed some milk and some other BS and this dude was standing in line with some items, but he was just staring at people using the U-Scans. Finally, after watching people use it, and my turn had arrived, he approached me and said, "Sorry my man. I don't mean to bother you, but I just served 20 years in prison and I don't know what I'm looking at." So I let him go ahead of me and walked him through it. He was crazy appreciative about something I wouldn't have thought 2 seconds about. It was that moment I realized how badly America's prison systems were failing its citizens. They're expected to be able to be tossed back into society with no new marketable skills, no social integration, no clue on the applications of new technology all, while not going back to jail. Shit is dumb. Anthony Ray Hinton described people walking around looking at down these things in their hands, phones, and amazingly not bumping into each other. OW, on the day you were released, your best friend, Lester, who had visited you every single week for nearly 30 years, picked you up. You've been behind bars since 1985. So you got in his car, and what was the first thing you wanted to do? RH. Lester thought I'd want to get something decent to eat. But I wanted to go where they laid my mother's body. I see him messing with the radio dial. Then we start driving down the road. I heard this little white lady say, "In 1/10 of a mile, turn right." I jumped and said, "What the hell? OW, you thought there was a white lady in the car?" RH, yes, and Lester's laughing so hard he has to pull over. He says, "That's a GPS." When he explained what it does, it really hit me how long I'd been locked up. The world had changed. I heard a guy talking about this who was sentenced in the 70s and got out in maybe 2015. One thing was he thought everyone was walking around talking to themselves. Then someone explained to him that they were talking on the phone with the little things in their ears. The other was that he got up to give his seat to a much younger woman on the subway and she argued with him and wouldn't take the seat when he insisted. I think eventually she did, but it upset the guy that women wouldn't take a seat when he offered, even though he was pretty old and grey by this point. My friend just came home 2 weeks ago, and I tried to prepare him the best I knew how for the excessive use of cell phones by everyone. I explained that he's going to be amazed by the amount of people glued to / looking at their phone 24/7 in the store, in the car, on the sidewalk, sitting in the house watching TV, like literally all the time. I also let him know that the technology is going to be really different since he went in over 13 years ago, so cell phones were still flip phones and definitely not as interactive, touch screens, and internet accessible. Needless to say, the second day home he called me angry as a shrew. He hated how he felt stupid and how he felt like a child because he could barely figure out how to call someone, let alone video chat / FaceTime. At one point he couldn't figure out how a phone call ended up on the radio when his friend turned on the car. He didn't like having his kids teach him how to use the technology and just was getting really discouraged. Basically, reiterating the feeling stupid mentality. I just tried to reassure him that when we all were exposed to this technology, we had to learn it, and many people forget what it was like to not know how to use something like a smartphone. We take for granted how we learned something and how we were once new to a process. Today it seems he's being more patient with himself, but it is a daily struggle and one I try to be positive and kind to him so he knows, if no one else, at least he can rely on/call on me to just listen to him vent. That's it for today. Do all the YouTube stuff and I'll see you all tomorrow.